We have come to a tipping point in the business of design. The point of no return, really. There has been a debate about form following function since architect Louis Sullivan coined the term. A protege named Frank Lloyd Wright once said, "Form follows function. That has been misunderstood. Form and function should be one, joined in a spiritual union." Think about that. Well, this will most likely not go over well with the most ardent Frank Lloyd Wright supporters and fans. But I believe Wright misunderstood this. As well, Sullivan suggested that form following function meant the design should speak to the intended purpose of a structure and not simply be reflective of historical design, ornamentation, or precedence. I won't speak for anyone but myself when I say that I have toured a number of Wright's works, and I don't necessarily agree with his take on form following function either. This will and should be debated, but not today. Today, we're going to focus on how form must follow function, or the project won't perform. It's funny too. For me to say something like that, there will instantly be a handful of people who agree ardently and those who disagree vehemently, which means I must be onto something. Not saying I'm right, but I must be onto something. So, in an effort to clarify, I will talk to people who know far more than I do. And we're going to do that. Today, you're going to hear from Parini Mehta, Tanner Clapham, and Michael Stebbins from Co-Architects. Co-Architects, a firm dedicated to perpetual innovation and continual improvement through collaboration. This is a firm dedicated to creating lasting impact through design, and the following conversation is evidence of that. The conversation is about the collaborative nature of an architecture firm that allows their architects to work on different types of projects and share their typology specialty while learning new ones in real time. We're discussing education architecture, healthcare, medical facilities, laboratory architecture, research, and exploring the idea of future-proofing structures from effects of both seen and unseen factors. I am so appreciative for this opportunity to explore these ideas with the incredible creatives. Since 2017, Convo by Design has been featuring peer-to-peer conversations from showrooms across the country. This one was recorded live from Design Hardware in Los Angeles. There has always been a deep divide between residential and commercial architecture. While I won't rant about it today, since the days of Julia Allison focused on the rise to celebrity through internet fame, we as a society have been discussing design and architecture through social value, not performative value. When you see your favorite design publication or website featuring the latest celebrity home, you will find that not much attention, if any, has been allocated or focused on the performative value of their space. How does it work? Much of what we see is about materiality, aesthetic, brands, and it's usually focused on a celebrity. And while that's fine, look, there's a market for it, right? Design porn is not new, but it also doesn't do much for moving the conversation forward. What conversation? How do top-tier architects and the firms that employ them focus on commercial design and create form that follows function in an environment where the function not only matters, but is critical to the success of the project? So that's the conversation we should be having. And we are. Today. And you're going to hear it right after this. At the highest level of design, The absolute best specifying designers, architects, landscape designers are all highly focused on the technology and performance of products and materials today. You have to, because the products you specify for your projects have to perform and they have to last. That's one of the reasons why I am so proud to be working with TimberTech. Their focus on the technical renaissance of synthetic decking is literally changing the conversation about innovation and performance. It pulls focus on three priorities homeowners have and expect from the products their designers and architects specify for their luxury projects. 1. Aesthetics must match the overall design and fit visually. 2. Durability and maintenance. I've told you about my board flipping stories from my own wood decks. Clients not only want beauty, but they want ease of use, and they want it to last for decades. 3, sustainably made. Clients are more conscious of the environment now, and they want the same of their materials. TimberTech hits each one of these elements with a product that not only meets expectations, they exceed them. TimberTech makes a synthetic decking that looks just like wood, color and embossed wood grain for a natural appearance. Their composite decking is technologically superior, as it has been created to last for decades, and it's manufactured with up to 85% recycled material. Their advanced PVC, vintage, and landmark collections have a Class A flame spread rating, making these products an amazing choice for wildfire-prone areas, which unfortunately continues to grow on the risk map. Check the show notes for more information about this and to find the nearest showroom or lumberyard where you can find TimberTech, or you can check them out directly, timbertech.com. So let's go around this way. Introduce yourselves and tell me what I don't want to call it a specialty, but typology. Is that, maybe that's where I could actually start, is do each of you work on your own, on a specialty as far as a typology, or is your philosophy more team in nature?
I'm Mike Stebbins. I'm an associate principal at Co-Architects, and I do focus on K through 12 work. But I think Tanner and Prini will talk about this as well, is that we do tend to cross sectors and work in different project types. I'm also working on a hospital right now, so we don't have what's called studios at Co. People kind of move around and have experience in all these different sectors.
I fully agree with what Mike said. It's one of the things that I love about Co. I came to Co 10 years ago with a background in healthcare architecture, so I knew that I had a specialty. But I was really fascinated by the work that Co does and the opportunity to perhaps work on other types of projects that had similar aspects to healthcare, being complex projects, mission-driven clients, a lot of user groups, which I love working with. So I do focus on healthcare work, but I'm currently working on a lab project, and I've worked with Mike on K through 12. I've done medical education projects, so I think it keeps all of us well-rounded in the trends that are happening within different market sectors and able to apply that to our core market sector.
Yeah, I think, they're all related. The typologies, there's overlap, and I think the other trend we're seeing is like hybridity of building type. So 10 years ago, you'd have a medical school and it was just classrooms, simulation, gross anatomy. And today you have a medical school, but there's research happening in that building. So there's labs and there's people who are kind of outside the clinical arm in that building. And so those types of mashups keep occurring. And I think it's interesting at Co in that we all, to a degree, yes, specialize on certain types, but we, through working together, are finding where those overlaps are occurring as the research evolves, as the institutions evolve, all that kind of stuff.
Tell me about the firm. If you had to define, and by the way, this is conversational, not questionnaire. So what do you think about? It's not question by person, it's more conversational in nature. Tell me about the firm. Tell me about, which are always humble beginnings, and what the ethos and philosophy is behind the company?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think Co, in its essence, supports like mission-driven institutional clients. And going way, way back, like the inception, the founding partners worked on the Salk Institute in San Diego, and they both trained under Louis Kahn. And so like that project in a way was like the starting point of Co. And he's a great exemplar of like a mission-driven kind of innovative project. And I think that has sort of grown or blossomed in many different ways over the past 20, 30 years.
And it started this notion that design is in everything that we do. The idea of craft is in everything that we do, but we're also striving to create spaces where innovation occurs by the occupants. And so it's always in service of the occupants, but it's really trying to create the best type of space for them. Co means with, it's a prefix that means with. And so we try to, showcase that. As Mike said, we don't have studios. We work, it's very team-based. We like to move our team members and give them opportunities to work on projects. Maybe for 1 year it's healthcare, and then the next project is med ed. So there is like an idea that we're all working together collaboratively on the projects and sharing the knowledge with one another.
I think we, pride ourselves on listening to our clients, but we also pride ourselves on helping the client to grow the vision of what could be for what their needs are. And so I think that goes across all sectors, I think.
Yeah, there's this idea of like thought leadership in these typologies. And we, like take higher ed, for example. It's like you're working on 10 campuses across the country. And so you can bring experience to bear, from one project to another. The same applies, I would say, in like all our project types, right? Where we can leverage lessons learned and experiences, and bring that to new clients that we're working with.
I feel like in doing this show for 12 years and in talking to creatives over the past 12 years, I'm not a designer, I'm not an architect, I didn't go to school for it, but I've been having these conversations for a very long time and seeing like, if you go back and you listen to an episode that I did 12 years ago, very different than it is now. And even in the last decade alone, the idea of what healthcare means to a community and what the nature of the healthcare architecture means for the morbidity rate or the success rate or the way that people feel about the experience has such a big effect on it. If you look at schools, 10 years ago, yes, there was this, I don't know when Columbine first happened, but I think everyone kind of attaches the school shooting to Columbine, like that was the first. It wasn't the first one, but that was the first one that it stopped everyone in their tracks, right? And when my kids were going through school in Manhattan Beach, there were no fences around their elementary school, but there are now. I don't know any schools that don't have fences around them, except in really small communities, and they probably will at some point, right? That's probably just more of a budget issue than anything else. But the need is now there because that didn't go away. That's a regular occurrence. I was just telling the story, my first career was in broadcast. And at every radio station I've ever worked at, or with, or for, there was always the sales pit. And anytime you define something as a pit, it's not a good thing, right? There's no interest in taking care of the people who are actually using that space. No matter how, if you're there for 8 hours sitting in a cubicle with no natural light and noise being pumped in and people talking around you, there was no thought. It was just a big space with cubicles put in. What you do is transformational in the way people live, but the difference is that if you were a famous celebrity's personal hospital or personal school, you might be an AD, or you might be in one of the other trade pubs, but people don't see what you do. That's why I asked about trade shows and like where the work winds up. So having these conversations, I feel, is really important. So if we're starting at healthcare, what are the things that you're thinking about now, that you ideate about the spaces now that maybe you weren't thinking about 10 years ago?
A space for the caregivers. I mean, in the pandemic just showed us they became the heroes, and they've always been the heroes, but they really showcased what they need in order to do their work. And so making sure that they have the resources, that they have the natural daylight, that they have a quiet space where they can decompress if they're going through a hard moment within their day. It's not appropriate to have to go into an exit stairway to cry or to release emotions or talk on the phone. So I think an emphasis on the people that are caring for our people is really important. And then, the patient, the families, like providing for them, just creating comfortable spaces where they can take care of each other in the best way possible, providing opportunities for outdoor spaces within a patient unit, being able to slip away and have a moment of solitude, or have a private conversation where you can get fresh air and feel that on your face is really important. We feel it when we're in our offices all day, so why would you not feel that if you're working in a hospital or if you're a patient in a patient room or a family member that's been there for weeks and weeks? So just bringing the humanity into what we do is really important.
And I think there's trends that kind of go across all our sectors. We've all been at Co for 10 or more years, and we've seen in the sectors that we work in the transformation of what is a norm. So there's concepts of biophilia and connection to outdoors, neuroarchitecture, flexibility for K through 12, flexibility in all of the furnishings that would be in a classroom to allow for kids to have different types of working environments in groups, individual. So I think we all kind of experience similar trends. There's something that goes through it all, but then there's also things that are specific to the sectors that we work in.
Mm-hmm. Technology is probably another one. I mean, 10 years ago, we weren't doing what we're doing today. And I think when you're at home and you have a certain way of interacting with technology, you would have that same expectation if you're in a classroom, you're in a hospital room, you're in an education space. So making sure that we're able to design for that and design the flexibility for the changes that might happen over a building that's 50 to 100 year lifespan.
Mm-hmm. I mean, backing up to where Perini started, I think like it's experience based, I think, is like a huge part of our design process, like the experience of a building. And on a lot of projects I've worked on, we imagine this through, we call it like a day in the life. And so it's imagining, I'm a student, I'm a teacher, I'm a visitor, whoever these people are who are regularly using the building, how do they interact with it? Where do they enter? Where do they go? Where's respite? Where's the view? So it's all put through that lens. And it's the way in which we talk to ultimately all of our clients about the building. It's really about their day-to-day life in these projects, because like we design them, we work on getting them built, but then they have decades of life after we're gone, that we're not a part of, and that's sort of the really fun part.
Getting away from the fun part for a second, we'll go back to that, but where I started, I'm curious, how is hardening the enclosure in schools and healthcare facilities the same way, knowing that there's a great deal of challenge there as far as, it used to just be keeping intruders out, but now it's about potentially keeping the threat within from doing more damage. I mean, I'm trying to put myself in your situation as you're looking at an enclosure and you're looking at the envelope and you're trying to imagine, okay, if there is a school shooter, because I imagine it in every design, that has to be a part of the equation. We don't want to talk about it. Nobody wants to talk about it, but you're the one who has to plan for it.
Mm-hmm.
How are those two different environments similar or different?
I could speak a little bit to what's happening at schools. I mean, the trend is to, campus used to be completely open. I've been working on North Hollywood High School for 10 years now. We're still got a year and a half of construction left. That campus has its new and historic buildings as its hard perimeter, and it's open before 9 a.m. It's open after 3 p.m., but during the school hours, there's a single point of entry at the main admin building. We have a vestibule that people come through with a card reader and intercom and camera. But in reality, there's no real perfect solution for security. It's more of a perceived thing. I know on the hospital projects, at the entries, there's often metal detectors. Maybe Prini, you can speak to a little more about what's happening there. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm working on a hospital now where the technology is evolving, and this is a long-term project that's going to go over 8 years. We're putting something in now, so there may be some different technology later when the tower of this hospital actually gets built. So
it's a struggle. I mean, we talk about it with our user groups. There's, on one hand, providing safety for the nurses and physicians that are working in a building. On the other hand, it's how open do you want to feel to the community? And it's finding a balance between those two things. So we might have spaces that are only occupiable, with a card reader or camera access or escorted access. It's a tough balance to strike. I think providing spaces that are really flexible within a hospital space, so you can have the options and kind of pull the levers where you feel like they need to. As Tanner was saying, after we go away, there's a new need that might happen, and we need to make sure that we can accommodate those instances. But especially in a hospital, security is so important, but being open as a community resource is also really important. So a lot of it you can't see. The places where you do see and you need to go through security access, we try to do it with people, try to keep our security staff safe wherever they might be standing, provide spaces for them. Technology has been kind of good in that way. We talk to a lot of clients about biometrics to make sure that their staff have access, but if they don't have access, there is no way to get into the building. We talk about that a lot on our projects. Just where do you access the building? How do you get in? Who gets in? It's very well thought out and planned for.
How do you envision current design juxtaposed against future programming in the space? Because, listen, in a residential project, it's very easy. You can move the family out. As the families change, in 15 or 20 years, you can change the design. In 20, 25 years, you can adjust the architecture. You can add on. You can do all kinds of things, right? But the program, what you're designing, what's the lifespan for what you're designing? What do you imagine when you design a building? For this purpose, how long do you expect it to last?
Well, I'm working on the North Hollywood High School campus. It's in 2027. It's going to be 100 years old, and we're renovating 3 historic buildings right now. And they're pretty traditional. So how we plan for the future is having flexibility in the technology, and as I mentioned, flexibility in the types of furnishings. But newer trends are showing spaces that can open up into one another more, so there's more flexibility. Teachers can integrate and collaborate more. There's challenges with that for acoustics, because when you start opening rooms up and having big glass doors, suddenly you don't have the acoustic ratings that you would normally have in a traditional classroom. And I know this happens in higher education too, mm-hmm. where spaces are often, you might have spaces that open up, big spaces that open up into even bigger spaces. And I know, Tanner, I don't know what's happening right now. You're working on some projects where...
Yeah, there's operable partitions. There's certainly a lot of that. I mean, I think To your original question, a long time, like 70 plus years, I think is the expectation. Campuses, like they will renovate if they can, which is great, from a sustainability point of view. So when we think about the future of our buildings, we think about, I'll call it like the chassis, right? It's like the columns and the slabs, all the things that you wouldn't really want to touch if you're renovating the building. And we try to design that to be as flexible as possible so that in 40 years, if an owner wants to adapt how that building's programmed, how it's used, how a classroom works, they can do that more easily than if we have a very nuanced column grid or layout, right? So there's that kind of design strategy that just comes to bear on like everything we work on. Is like, how flexible can we make this in the long term so that they can adapt it?
We start on a lot of our healthcare projects start from the campus scale and spend a lot of time planning, like, okay, we've been commissioned to do this building, but what will the campus look like in 100 years? And so let's make sure that our building works with what that future plan might be. And so that might be, designing inside of our building so a new building can connect with it, or that there's a central point of access in our building or our next building that works with whatever we're designing. And then from the campus view, we go more micro into the building, into the planning. We had a really wonderful project in San Diego where the client was really concerned about the flexibility of the operating rooms. And so we designed a very specific structural system. So there were no columns on that floor, on that particular floor. And so if they needed to add more operating rooms or change the configuration, make them bigger, make them smaller, they had the ability to do that in the future. I'm working on a project right now where we have designed different configurations for floor plans and scenarios and make sure that the vibration criteria of the slab, for example, can accommodate the worst case. And that might not happen in 100 years, that might happen while we're in construction, but we're prepared for it. Research changes, or new equipment might be available to researchers, and they have grant money, they have specific research, they want to make it happen. And for us to say, well, the building doesn't accommodate that, doesn't work for our clients. We need to make sure that we can future-proof as much as we can.
You are listening to my conversation with Co-Architects. We'll be right back. The most important word in the design industry today is service. Product, incredibly important. Price, important. Selection, incredibly important. But stellar service is the premier idea that can make all the difference in the success of any project. This is how design professionals like you demand great service for your projects. And you get your favorite brands in one place with expert, knowledgeable, and non-commissioned professionals to help you specify the right product for each of your projects and get the best price. Non-commissioned, that is incredibly important. And at Pacific Sales Kitchen and Home, a Best Buy company, that means their only incentive is your satisfaction. Pacific Sales Kitchen and Home, a Best Buy company, has just that with over 60 years of service in Southern California. Pacific Sales is your destination for exploration, advice, inspiration, all the best brands, great prices, the best in the industry when it comes to service, and you know it's reliable. You know that you are going to get predictable results, reliable results every time. And now you have the Pacific Sales Kitchen and Home team to help you with their Pro Rewards program, which is a trade program unlike any you've ever experienced before. Earn 3% in Best Buy e-gift cards or 2.5% in a reward check for every qualified and delivered sale, in addition to special trade pricing, exclusive offers, access to exclusive special events, and so much more that I can't even begin to try and list it all here. And here's the cherry on top. Access to exclusive builder trade incentives from top brands and the stellar service you deserve from a company that has been serving the industry for over 60 years. Now, terms and conditions apply to the Pro Rewards program and builder trade incentives. So visit a Pacific Sales expert at a showroom today for full details and learn how you can unlock additional savings and benefits. Don't miss out on the opportunity to work with the best of the best. Visit Pacific Sales Kitchen and Home today and elevate your projects to new heights. The Design Hardware Showroom is a space where specifiers can go and find an incredible selection of high-end faucets, luxury tile, natural stone, wood floors, and bespoke hardware, and so much more. Select products are presented in a holistic manner, strategically arranged to stimulate creativity and transition your vision from the conceptual stage to a fully realized space. You will find everything you're looking for, even the products by brands you didn't know you didn't know. Surprise and delight. Am I right? All under one roof on 3rd Street in Los Angeles, just up the street from the Grove. Conveniently located, free parking available. Stop by to find inspiration, collect samples, get expert advice, and tackle everything on your specification list all in one place. Visit them online at designhardware.com, at Design Hardware and Flooring on the socials, or in the real world, 6053 West 3rd Street in Los Angeles. Let's talk about future-proofing for a second, because I'm curious. Let's take education for a second. So during the pandemic, look, let's just say earthquakes, fires, floods, pandemics. Once something happens once, it's a fair assumption that it's going to happen again. Maybe the distance between Spanish flu and COVID-19 is going to be 100 years, but maybe the next one isn't going to be 100 years. Maybe it's going to be 10 years. Maybe it's going to be 5 years. Maybe it's going to be 50. Who knows?
Maybe it's going to be next year.
Maybe. Stock up on eggs. Can you freeze eggs yet?
I don't think so.
Embryos, yes.
Certain ones, yeah.
But once something happens, then it's going to happen again. It's just a matter of when, not if, right? And one of the things that I think we all learned during the pandemic, and certainly those of us with kids, is those kids now had to go someplace else to learn. That place was a residential home, which is not the place for learning. It's just not. Do you think about future-proofing? Do you think about this idea of, especially where, not every neighborhood has good schools? And I'm a product of Southern California, Los Angeles. When I was in 5th grade, they instituted busing, forced integration into other communities. It was a mix and match, and it was a terrible failure. It did not work because there were huge cultural differences. But I'm curious if there were satellite locations where you could have good educators teaching remotely as part of an education system. Maybe the North Hollywood High School has a remote location in another part of the community for smaller groups at certain types. I mean, I'm imagining here, I'm just guessing, but the idea is to healthcare that there are remote operating rooms where the surgeon could be 100 miles away, but between robotics and someone on staff to make sure that things are technically working. And again, this is just ideation. This is future thought. How does that work into the manner in which you ideate, you think, you craft and create against the unknown?
That's where it gets really exciting.
I would imagine.
Yeah, and I think it's where a lot of the work that we do overlaps one another. I mean, part of the flexibility with healthcare is not necessarily the space, but it's just having people to be able to address, a very dire global situation. And so to me, it's, how are we training our physicians and our nurses, which is what Tanner's thinking about. And, we work on projects that are super long. I mean, a hospital, we might start with the design now and it's not completed until 10 years from now. Who's going to be working in those buildings, and how many of those people are going to be working in those buildings? We do a lot with future-proofing in healthcare, and it's been exciting to go through the pandemic because our owners had to react immediately, and we were a part of that. I feel, in a way, lucky to be able to see that, just from how what people think about how a plan is executed. spaces that I did not think would be used for healthcare spaces were all of a sudden the only space that was available. And staff that might not be doing, certain things are all of a sudden having to take on a lot. So it's hard to plan all the scenarios, and there's so many factors that go into it. Design is one piece of it, but there's a lot that we've been thinking about. Some of the solutions are not the future. I mean, some of them are like the tried and true. We want to have redundancy. We want to have backup. We don't want to use a system that's new. We want to make sure that we're using a system that's reliable. That's one way to look at it. But others can be really interesting, like how do we transform a parking garage into ORs, or take care of patients, and how do we get air filtration into that parking garage, and how do we get the spaces set up so it can be functional? That's another part of it.
There's a trend in education to do more outdoor learning and provide shade structures and different types of environments, but also the technology that they can have outside. And I think that was pushed because of the pandemic too, because there are some schools. I was at a conference last year in Hawaii, and there's schools there that are all outdoors, and they're highly successful and have great educational outcomes. And so that is a trend that is moving forward and evolving as we speak in the K through 12 world. I also wanted to say, I think our office is like a case study of adaptability, because I would say our leadership would have not agreed to work from home if there hadn't been a pandemic. We didn't think that was something that could work. But I think on a dime, we made it work. And we had 2 of our most successful years during the pandemic of the entire firm's history.
Really?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you equate that to?
It's like nuanced.
Yeah.
We had the opportunity to go after 2 very, very large projects, and we really, put everything into them, and we were lucky enough to win them. So that's kind of an unusual, just magical point.
And we went into it very busy, and we were really fortunate that what we were working on didn't stop. So I think it was the combination of winning a couple of big projects, but also like we were really on the brink, in the end of 2019 in terms of what we were doing. We were already really, really busy.
And the importance of our projects were highlighted at that time.
Yeah.
Too. So
Yeah.
nobody was going to
all the things.
stop a project because of a pandemic. No, it was we need this to be online faster than before.
Yeah.
And so we really had to push ourselves to come up with fast solutions that were flexible and that could, go into different methodologies of contracting, so we could really get a fast building, a building out there faster than ever before.
There has been such a revolt and heavy push on the part of corporate entities, government entities, considering where we are now, against remote working. Jamie Dimon says he wants everybody back. Our current administration does not believe in remote work, remote learning. What did you, and I feel, I could be wrong, but I think that this can tie directly back to architecture and design, and I'm curious, what did you learn from the remote working experience? What made it so successful for you, both individually and as a group?
I think we surprised ourselves that we could do it. Like Mike was saying, it's like I feel like we all thought we were going to be home for a week or two in March 2020, and then months went by, but we found a way to do it. We adapted like really quick, and I think everyone just rose to the occasion and found, a lot of it's software based, just like new ways to interact that haven't gone away. We're still doing a lot of those things.
It's funny, Tanner, you're very macro but I'm curious, when you get down to the micro, what was it? And let me give you some prompts, right? For me and what I do, Zoom changed everything. because I didn't have to go out and do interviews in person. Like, it made what I did very easy. I could stay in the studio and do what I did very, very easily. I wasn't always collaborating though. And because what you do is so collaborative, surprising yourself and finding success, I think that you could definitely equate that to the individuals that you are. Totally get it. But what was it about that experience that allowed you to be so successful? Was it a philosophical approach? Was it a willingness to try new things? Was it a combination of technology and everybody look, I also think that a huge amount of trust has to be given to let people do that. And with that trust being given, performance is returned, right? Because you appreciate the trust. I think there's a lot of things that go into that. I'm just curious if you can pin any of those things down.
I think one is time. You know, like commutes were gone, right? All those things were gone. So, and people weren't going out, right, in May of 2020. So I think people worked harder. You know, for whatever reason, there was a lot of people just working harder. And then I think that, like, we got more involvement being remote, ironically. Everyone could hop on a Zoom call. Whereas if we were in the office, it'd be like XYZ is going to this meeting, everybody else can, you know, stay back. And that changed on a dime for us. We're like, all of a sudden, people were hearing conversations firsthand, and we learned that it enabled them to, like, move faster, work faster, rather than relying on someone to come debrief them on something that might have happened.
But I do want to say, I don't think we're a hybrid office now, and I don't think we believe that we need to be together. I don't think we believe that we can have success long-term working remotely. There's a lot that we gained, and, you know, I think that example of having all of our team members join client meetings, for example, or user meetings, has carried through to when we've moved back to the office. But there's something about being together, discussing design solutions together, listening to other people's conversations, stopping and talking to one another, seeing what other projects are working on. We didn't get to see that when we were all working at home. We only saw what we were working, and we only saw our team members. And there's a lot that's gained by just seeing materials on a table for a project that's not yours, while you're filling up your coffee cup, you know, or waiting for a conversation to start or end. The conversations that happen on the way to a conference room versus just like logging onto a Zoom call and starting a meeting right away. So we found ways to make it work, but when you say success, I think there's successes in both ways of working, and I wouldn't want to go one way or the other. I think we just need to find, how do we find, you know, a solution that works well for growth in all different ways.
And I wouldn't say it was easy to find the way to work together in that type of environment. We really struggled. I mean, especially junior members of our office who kind of rely on being able to go to their colleague or go to their superior and ask questions. It just became a little bit more cumbersome. You know, the architect's office is a teaching environment. It's like the apprenticeship. Kids come out of school and they don't know everything they need to know, and so being in the office with seniors that can help them, bring them along, is critical for the architecture practice. Even today, we're looking for better ways of working in a hybrid environment, because we have people who are across the country. We have our San Diego office, our LA office, but we have people in Georgia and Baltimore, Portland, Seattle, and and we have consultants all over the place, and we need to work together in a hybrid way. And so we're still struggling and looking for, how can we optimize this for everybody?
And I'm drilling down on that because I'm curious how the changes and development of the institutional knowledge in what you do, due to the nature of the work that you do and the collaborative nature and how it works, how that was transferred into the projects that you work on. It's one thing. You didn't learn how to address pandemic challenges at school for architecture. I'm imagining that was not a class.
No.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Thankfully.
Right? Well, or, because I would imagine that in the future, during the pandemic, I started this sort of offshoot to the program called Designing for Disaster, where that's all we were talking about. Like, tell me what a crappy week you had this week. Tell me what you learned this week that you can't do anymore until this whole thing, whatever this is, ends, right? And gathering all of that data when everything was over was extraordinary, because you could see who had forgotten that whole experience and didn't incorporate it into their future work. Where if you want to future-proof something, you kind of have to take that institutional collective knowledge and apply it to the work you do, because what you do is not dissimilar from what your clients in the healthcare industry do, or your clients in the education industry do. Teachers, man, my heart goes out to the teachers. I'm not a teacher, but I had plenty of interaction with my kids' teachers. I am a club soccer coach, though, and I never before had to run virtual practices.
Nightmare.
Oh my gosh, you want to talk about a nightmare.
Yeah.
Hey Katie, pick up your feet. I can see you on camera. You're trying to watch 9 players or 11 players in little boxes while they're in their backyards.
Oh my gosh.
But look, teachers with 36 students trying to get little Johnny to stop watching TV on his iPad and pay attention to the lesson. That's hard. You're in the medical industry, trying to have a virtual consultation with a patient with kids running around. You're in the doctor's office and it's very sterile, and I don't mean to insult, but it's very quiet, and it's very professional. And when you can't do that because you've got external forces and factors, I'm just kind of trying to put myself in your shoes as you think about future-proofing and this idea of being able to work in different constructs, in different environments, or rather your clients doing that, and the lessons that you learned along the way, how you can help them do that. I would think that that's incredibly valuable.
There's a lot of discussion into, telemedicine took off when we were, during the pandemic, and the reimbursements for telemedicine appointments also took off. So it made it profitable to do something like that. I think what the balance is really, how equitable can you be? I think it's better in a lot of instances to be together. If you were coaching that soccer team and everyone was together, they'd probably get a lot more out of it. But there are benefits to not having to be together, and you just have to kind of weigh what works and what doesn't work, and it feels like an experiment still. So we're trying to figure it out. I think our clients are trying to figure it out. What happens in the news, affects what people's thought process is and where their mind is at. So we're designing for so many different situations that we can't always foresee, but we can make sure that we're thinking about and have a strategy to react to it.
How much, this is a pedestrian question and I apologize, but how much of that experience was covered during your formal education? And I ask the question because now that you have each been doing this for a significant amount of time, sometimes it's hard to put yourself in the position of young architects who are just coming in to the business, because you have generational factors that you have to take into account, and they're real. You have to take learned behavior into account because it's real. And especially, young architects who are coming into the firm now, they were directly affected by the pandemic. It's hard to believe because, the pandemic was so long ago. It really wasn't that long ago at all. But how much of that was covered, and what does that mean for you in working? I'm going to guess, not working with you every day, but I'm going to imagine, because this is what you do in your industry, is giving back and mentoring and working with younger architects, because if you can create successful younger architects, they will become successful, experienced architects, and they make life easier for everyone in the firm. Right?
Well, they continue our firm. That's what's important. They continue our firm.
Yeah, legacy. Totally get it. What did you learn in your formal education experience that maybe was even remotely touching on that? And what do you think you will find in future learnings that will cover that?
For me, where I went to school, there was one class called professional practice. Like, you kind of scrape the surface, but that's it. You know, it's the architecture schools vary. The one I went to was really focused on like teaching you how to think. It's almost like a liberal arts program, but not about how to run a practice. Nothing about the profession. I think that indirectly there was some exercises that were team-based, so you learn how to work with others, but the majority were independent. So specifically for me, like, I'm learning all this on the job, and you just kind of learn as you go. I mean, we do as a leadership group talk about this reality that we all face, that we don't have that training, and how do we help ourselves be better, you know, at mentoring and being there for others. But it's definitely like, at a certain point, things flip, and like, that's your job. And I kind of feel like we're all kind of learning how to do that the best we can.
Yeah, formal education doesn't cover a disaster situation, and it doesn't, at least for me, and it doesn't cover before the pandemic, just professional practice very well. But I also feel like we just cannot compare generation to generation. Everything is so different. It's really hard for me to, I don't want to say relate to, but there's so many differences in what today's generation is experiencing and how they, you know, think and experience the world than my generation, I guess you could say. So learning is really different, but I do think that what architecture school prepared me for was collaboration. I know a lot of the projects were independent, but we learned in a studio environment, and working with your peers and reviewing your project and talking about ideas, and you know, that type of collegiality carries through to the practice, I would say. And so it makes me sad for those that didn't get to experience it. If they had to do studios at home and they didn't get to have late nights and talk to their co-students, their classmates, about the projects that they were working on, or the feedback that they got, or, you know, sharing something, you know, just the banter in those settings. I think it's really important for our education to be exposed to everyone, to different ideas in that type of setting. So it's easy to forget that people didn't get to experience that, or that they may not ever experience that, because our experience is different than what the next generation's experience is going to be. So really, like, I think trying to have understanding and curiosity about how people work and learn today. And that goes on both sides. I mean, you know, there might be those that think being together isn't as important because we went to school and we were able to successfully graduate doing it through Zoom, so why do I need to be in an office? It's two-way learning. I mean, I think it goes both ways.
Right, and we're always looking at our staff and seeing where are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, how can we fill in the gaps so that they become a more well-rounded architect, because that also supports the firm and our projects and our clients. We just had our annual leadership retreat, and one of the topics was the difference in the newer generation and how they like to receive praise, for instance, or feedback. And it's more instant, you know. In an older generation, I'm the older of the three of us here, and you know, my feedback was, well, I got a paycheck, and I've got to work hard, and I got to learn a lot, and just buckle under, and long hours, and it's a different world today. You know, I think the younger generation has bristled a little bit up against the traditional architectural practice, which in the past, I'll just say it, has been a bit abusive towards younger staff, not just younger staff, everybody suffered. Everyone had all-nighters.
It's the fountainhead.
Yeah, it's the fountainhead.
A little bit.
But I think, you know, and that was the norm. And I think more recently, the younger generation's like, no, I'm not doing that. That's not the way I want to live my life. And we need to recognize that and adjust.
I think the other side to that too is the work we do is so purposeful that a lot of the younger generation has been attracted to that. They don't want to work for commercial properties or a developer or single family residential because the impact is a lot less than the projects we work on. So I've seen a little bit of a shift there.
I love that. Thank you for doing this. These conversations, I think, are so beneficial. I think they're great just to sit down and be able to chop it up a little bit, because I'm always learning more from this. And it's funny because a good friend of mine who's an architect told me once that architecture school doesn't really teach you how to be a designer. It teaches you critical thinking. Is that fair?
Yeah.
And I have also said that, you know, good architects, good interior designers, good landscape designers and architects, you're futurists because you have to be, because you're not designing for today, because your projects don't just, until we get, you know, AI perfected, you can't just imagine something and have it pop up overnight. So that idea of futurism and hardening enclosures against threats, both current and future, I just think it's so incredibly important, and that's what you guys do. So that's why I love these conversations. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Perini, Michael, and Tanner, for taking the time to visit. Thank you to all of the professionals at Co-Architects for your skill and willingness to share. Thank you to my incredible partner sponsors, TimberTech, Pacific Sales, and Design Hardware, amazing companies and great friends of the trade. So please give them an opportunity to specify on your next project. Thank you for listening, subscribing to the show, and sharing this with your colleagues that you think might be interested. If not already subscribing, please consider doing so that you receive every new episode automatically to your podcast feed. Please keep those emails coming, convobydesign@outlook.com, and follow the conversation on Instagram at convobydesign with an X. Until next week, thank you for sharing this time together. Until the next episode, be well, stay focused, and now that it has arrived in earnest, try to rise above the chaos.